All right, my friends, welcome back to another V-Rising video. So a few months ago, I made a video talking about balance issues in the V-Rising 1.0 patch. And in it, I talked about one of the biggest reasons there were issues, or one of the biggest issues anyway, was the fact that Scholar or Caster builds struggled a lot to see consistent value from their offensive spells due to the movement speed and everything going on in that patch specifically. And what I mean by value, a really easy way to describe that would be how essentially the return on investment for using one of your cooldowns. So example of that could be just here as a Shadow Bolt, the damage I get for hitting someone with my Shadow Bolt. And in the 1.0 patch, it was really hard to hit them, and even whenever you did, a lot of times, depending on what spell you were using, there was a very narrow set of spells that could see consistent value. Now, this concept has changed drastically in the 1.1 patch. So because of things, because of the movement speed, in general, how much movement speed we get from things like Rogue Blood, as well as Amulet of the Unyielding Charger and Dracula Shadow set, and especially because there is now a hard cap, soft and hard cap on movement speed, it is significantly easier to hit people with your spells. And because of the new stat system and being able to combine bloods and all the different things like elixirs and coatings and all these different things, it's much easier to not only land spells, but also to then get value from those spells or to see the damage be very, very high. So example of that would be here with Frostbat, where it says, hey, it does bonus damage if you hit someone who's chilled or frozen. And we can do things like freeze them and then hit them with this, and you can see some pretty decently high damage on those spells. On top of that, there's a lot of other things going into that, like the spell charge system and coatings and things like that. But overall, it's just become a lot easier to get value out of offensive spells in the 1.1 patch. So unlike physical builds, caster builds have a much more narrow set of stats that they need or want to build around to begin seeing really big returns on those stats. So those things would primarily, first and foremost, just be spell power, and then obviously spell crit chance, spell crit power, just in general. Obviously there's things like, spell charge gain, which is really, really good, and ultimate power, which is obviously gonna be nice for your ultimate. But in general, these three stats are the kind of the most important things to see big damage from your offensive spells. Obviously, you don't want to have offensive stats for your offensive spells. And physical builds, on the other hand, they tend to want... Generally, you're always sacrificing something on the physical side to get something else. So if you want to max out like full physical stats, you're probably going to be sacrificing something like attack speed and or weapon charge gain, or you could have like really good attack speed or solid attack speed and solid other stats, but maybe you don't really have a lot of weapon charge gain, etc., etc., etc. Then obviously both of these things in casters and physical, they want things like bonus movement speed, they want things like damage reduction, shield efficiency, bonus max health, health, bonus healing received. Of course they want those types of things, but because of the way that stats are allocated for caster stats specifically, actually makes it super easy for casters to hit those crucial core stats and still have a ton of stats left over via or room in different things like blood, passives, etc., to see other huge investments into other things as well. So it also means that these caster builds come online much faster because you don't have to, unlike a physical build, which really wants different certain stats on weapons, like you want to see like physical stats, bonus physical power, and weapon attack speed and things like that. You want to see that kind of stuff, right? Well, on spellcasters, really the biggest thing you're looking at is spell power, and then obviously spell crit power. But spell power is the big one you want to max out as early as possible, and it is really not that difficult. So let me just give you an example of what that looks like. So, and the reason for that, one of the big reasons for that, is for some reason, I don't really know why this is the case. Let's do this. Drac Skull. Okay. So for some reason, every single caster blood has the ability to get 2 sources of spell power on their tier 1 stats. So whether it is Draculan, Scholar, or Mutant Blood, every single one of those things makes it very easy or every single one of those bloods gives you 2 sources of spell stats. So look at this right now. I have spell power on my weapon and I am 2 sources over cap. If I wanted to, I could go even higher by putting on like enhanced connectivity. Like you can go over that cap, which obviously you'd never do that. You're just wasting those stats. But I'm just demonstrating, like I could literally take my weapon off and go onto a physical weapon and I would still be hitting max spell power, which is the most important stat for caster builds. Reason being is spell power is not the only thing. Sorry, spell power doesn't only affect, let's see here, it doesn't only affect your spell damage. Spell power also affects things like ignite damage from chaos, right? So if you want to put like a chaos volley, it affects the amount of damage on this burn effect. Right here, it affects the amount of damage from that. It affects the amount of damage from agonizing flames. It affects how big your shield is on things like Phantom Aegis. It affects how, obviously it scales with your crit damage as well, which is obviously super, super important. It also affects static damage, like how much damage is coming off of static, like from a spear Q. Each of those static ticks is affected by how much spell power you have. And it also works for certain things like Thousand Storms, this legendary here. You can see on the Q, it shoots out a little ball lightning that does 25% magic damage. It scales that. It scales Wings of the Fallen, this vampiric curse right here. That's scaled off of spell power. The little blood fountain here on Wings of the Fallen, the little bonus blood fountain damage, that scales off of spell power. And most importantly, or one of the most important things, your weapon coatings scales off of spell power. So you can see where that spell power is just such a huge deal. Also healing effects on a lot of things. So like, for instance, spell leech right here. Whoops, so let's go here. Spell leech right here. I have 22% spell leech. So obviously that's the percentage of the damage you deal. That scales off of how much spell power you have, right? Like the more damage you're dealing on your spells, the more healing you're getting. And then things like agonizing flames. It says heal yourself for 12% of your spell power 5 times. So you can see how many things are affected by spell power. It's so important and it's so easy to hit the cap on. It is kind of ridiculous. Like you can run Draculan Scholar. You can Dracula you don't even have to run a second blood. I wonder if I can just do this. Let me see this right here. This is where it just gets ridiculous. I just go like this. I wonder if I just do this. Oh, it doesn't have a second. Okay, let's do this then. BP, let's do Drac Creature. Okay, so Draculan Creature. Creature is not giving me any spell stats whatsoever, and yet I'm still sitting here at the bonus spell cap because of my weapon stats. And even if I took my weapon stats off, even if I used a pistol, physical stats here, I'm 2 sources down, I can still get within 1 source by putting on enhanced conductivity. I am now within 1 source of that max. So it's so easy to hit that spell cap. Okay, so let's go back into stats here. And the reason this is so important, let's talk specifically, the reason this is such a big deal is primarily for open world. Whenever you're on a wipe and you're in open world, you're roaming around, it means that you can hit this crucial stat super, super easily. Even if you just have, or even come close to hitting it, even if you just have a single high percentage blood, you have a 100% Scholar, Draculan, or even just 100% Mutant, you can get to that 100%, or you can get to nearly max spell power as early as like Gloomrot, like hitting the Gloomrot south level 50, 60. If you find 100% Mutant, you have like spell armor and whatnot. You can start seeing, you can see how it would be very easy to hit that cap. So let's go ahead and adjust this really quickly. All right, so let's talk about a couple different caster archetypes. So there's a few caster archetypes. There's actually a lot of caster archetypes, but the basic, some of the basic ones, we're just going to talk generally here, would be combo builds. For instance, this would be the most easy one to describe for this would be a frost build. Like kind of this is just like the old school frost build here with Veil of Frost, and then you have Frost Barrier and Frostbat. And then obviously you can run chill coating. The idea here is you're kind of chaining these different things together to freeze the enemy and then capitalize on that with Frostbat to do big damage. And then you can refreeze or knock them away with Frost Barrier and then hit them again with another Frostbat, maybe hit them with another Frostbat, and then you can do this and refreeze them again, right? And you're just constantly chaining these different freezes. Obviously, there's diminishing returns, but you get the idea how you're kind of like looking for those combos. And part of those combos also include things like, hitting like this right here, and you can slasher and then hit that again, and then spear Q them, right? Veil in, whatever. So you can see what I'm saying. So you have these different, like, tons of different freezes and stuns and different things to do that. So that's just a very basic combo build. So another thing that you can look at, another archetype that you can probably look at here that would give you a nice idea. Let's just use this as an example here. Would be something along the lines of a caster or a support build, where you're kind of running. Let's see here. It would be like Scholar, Mutant 3, I believe. Yes, and then you would run this right here. And essentially, you are maxing out your spell power on this, so that the idea is your allies are fighting over here. You can cast a huge Phantom Aegis on top of them that is really good for a big HP, as well as obviously you can give them like movement speed, knockback, or fear, etc. on that. And then you're using your spells at long range, kind of poking, doing damage that way. And then at the end of the day, your goal is to hit them with the most insane ult damage that you've ever seen in your life, where just this 800 damage from across the map. You can actually make it do significantly higher damage than that. But yes, so that's like kind of a little support build, but you're kind of sticking around in the back and you're casting, your Aegis on people and maybe hitting them with Chaos Barrier like that or Chaos Volley like that, doing some solid damage. And then when you're just looking for those ults to finish them off or to combo with your teammate or to save your teammate to do huge damage. And then another one of my favorite things that I've been playing a lot of has been kind of like a sustained high damage kite build somewhat. I've been playing it like this, where essentially what you're doing is you run Phantom Aegis and Chaos Volley with knockback, and you also have a pretty solid amount of like spell charge gain and or the spell leech, where you're kind of just doing a lot of damage, like consistent damage from far away. When they get close, you use Phantom Aegis to push them back, push them away like that. You can apply a bunch of different debuffs to them and just hit them and deal a bunch of damage. You also have a bunch of spell leech and like agonizing flames going, and so the whole time you're just kind of poking and doing consistent sustained damage. Obviously a really common way to do that would be using something like Void, where you're far away and you're kind of just using this. You also primarily you could see it with something like Frost Barrier, or Frost Barrier specifically is really strong here because it has the ability to knock them back. So maybe they get close to you, you can knock them away like this, but you can also apply that chill. Maybe you can freeze them with that, right? And I don't have Veil of Frost, but that's okay. There we go. Freeze them like that to keep them off of you, and then you can kind of spam them down with voids from long range, and you're just sitting back in safety, just spamming voids from super far away. Okay, and so how do you come to figuring out? There's also there's other archetypes than this. This is just very general. Like again, this is just very general. Hopefully, this explains a bit how you can kind of like approach that. Now how do you approach making a build? So how do you approach figuring out what kind of build you want to run? So first and foremost, my suggestion on that would be to decide on what you want your win condition to be. So that's kind of like the best way you can describe it. So for instance, if you're running that Frostbat build we were talking about, your win condition here is essentially you're trying to lock them down and hit them with these big Frostbats from across the map and chaining different combos together for big stun chains like this, right? And you're just kind of going. So, I mean, look how much you're doing, 200 damage a hit from these Frostbats. You can see how that would kind of be your win condition on that, right? So you're trying to like chain different CC things, do combos on that. That could be a win condition. A win condition on something like Chaos Volley or Void or whatever it may be. Let's just say we're using, let's see. Okay, we're just gonna swap to this. So let's say we're using this win condition here would be more so like you are using Chaos Barrier to keep yourself protected. You can stun them, and while they're stunned, you're just hitting them for huge Chaos Volley damage, right? And kind of keeping that burn on them as much as you possibly can. Obviously, you have the different passives for that. You would run on Chaos Killing or doing Flames. That kind of thing would be crucial there as well. And your goal there is essentially just doing that sustained damage as your win condition. And if you really want to see kind of how that plays out and if you want to see a really good resource for different builds and build types, there is a awesome YouTuber by the name of Chappll, who is basically, he's been playing caster builds since like the dawn of time in this game. So if you have questions or want to see a lot of different combos, he basically just fully mains caster builds for almost all the time. I mean, I've literally, since I've been watching him for I don't even know how long, he's been using different caster builds and constantly been using, even whenever they were not the greatest, he was still running them. So he has a lot of knowledge there. He also has a really awesome resource that goes into a lot of different builds on different things, whether it's caster or physical, but you can use that to kind of pair that. I'll link all of this, all of his information in the description, so go ahead and check that out. So let's talk about some basic theory for casters and why I think caster builds are just so good right now. And I really think if you are struggling to figure out what your niche in V-Rising is or how to enter into the PvP scene, why you should really be giving caster builds a second look. So one thing that's always been true in V-Rising is that if you ignore the caster, if you ignore a caster in a team fight who's sitting here back here spamming you, you will at some point eventually regret it big time, because eventually they're going to hit you with something that just does 200 damage or even more than that. You can chain you in combos and you're just going to be like, you're just going to have a bad time. And that, in my opinion, has never been more true in the 1.1 patch. It is so easy to just suddenly do a huge amount of damage. So let me just show you something here that I've actually really been enjoying. Right here, this is a build that I've personally been enjoying. That's been kind of fun to play, is using Phantomagus and then use Knockback Jewel on Phantomagus with knockback and bonus spell power and Chaos Volley. Then I have all my stats are maxed out here for spell stats. That's via, I'm using Draculan Blood and Scholar 2. You can use Scholar 2, Scholar 3, whatever you want to do. And then I have these stats on my weapon. So big crit chance. And then I'm actually over, am I over cap? No, I'm actually not over cap here. So I have these three things here. So we have, oh, the reason I'm not over cap is because I'm not running this right here. So generally what I would do actually is run this. And I would actually, I've been running Elixir of the Bat. So I'm a little bit low on spell crit power. Just one source off. But I have absolutely absurd spell leech at 22%. And then, oh, yeah, spell leech 22%. I have huge spell cooldown. And then you can see here, I have Cold Soul, Spiritual Infusion, and Renewing Flames. And the idea here, if you don't know what those things do, Cold Soul gives you spell critical power, but also if something is chilled or frozen, you do increased damage to it. Spiritual Infusion gives you big time healing received, but also if it has Weaken on them, it does increase spell damage. And Renewing Flames gives you 8% increased spell damage on ignited targets. And Ignite heals you for 25% of your spell power. So the way this works is you can very easily dash in with a Veil of Chaos, which means your auto attack will apply Ignite. You could then hit them with a Chill Coating, which applies that chill. Then you can use Phantomagus, which applies the Weaken, and suddenly you could do this kind of damage. 218 damage crit, so it's 135, 218 damage crit, and you can see they're still taking damage from this. And if I hurt myself, let's do this. I'll just hurt myself by 300 HP. Check this out real quick. Look how much health I heal from this. You can see that I am just getting absolutely ridiculous amounts of healing off of this from a single Veil attack into a Chaos Volley. You could say I almost healed myself, I mean, it's like 200 and almost 30, was that 230-ish HP? So absolutely crazy amounts of healing off of this. And it's been super, super fun messing around with this. And so the reason I'm showing this is because this is the kind of thing, this kind of win condition, I talked about the win condition, basically just that massive amounts of healing and big damage from Chaos Volley, and then while they're kind of getting to you. So a general caster theory, you don't want them to get close to you, right? I said if they ignore you as a caster, it's going to be a bad time for them. So they want to try to get near you. So I'm currently running a Knockback Jewel and Fear on this as well. And I have Knockback on Chaos Volley. So the idea is I'm pushing them back. You could see just those two spells. Look how far back he is, and he just took 400 damage from that. And he's still taking damage. That's almost half his HP from a single spell. That is a bad time, and he's that far away. How is he going to punish me on a physical build from that far away? I could even hit him from this far away, and he's all the way back there. I mean, he just can't get to me, right? So the idea behind these caster builds, or one of the ideas is keeping that space. So if you're looking for ways to create that space, it's super, super helpful. And because that win condition is so simple, this is where we're going to talk a little bit about weapons and why I think this is a great starting point, not just this build, but just caster builds in general, are a great starting point for entering into the PvP side. Is because, first and foremost, I'm going to give you a disclaimer. The more weapons you master, the more you can juggle on a hotbar, up to 8, the better you will be able to perform, the higher your individual skill ceiling will be. However, I honestly believe if you can use these 4 weapons right here, or if you can swap out Reaper for Whip, so Spear, Pistol, Slashers, and then either Reaper or Whip, if you can become comfortable with those 4, you can absolutely be viable even at like significantly high levels of PvP. Now, the highest levels, you'll want to just keep adding more and more weapons because you need more tools for more crazy situations. But honestly, as a starting point, this is like crazy amounts of viability in so many different moments inside of PvP. I mean, I have a bunch of clips I've probably been sharing where I essentially have been running this against people who are, they're pretty confident and pretty comfortable with weapon swapping overall and just PvP in general. And I'm able to just run 4 weapons and see some pretty solid success in those situations. Now, again, that 8 weapon disclaimer, the more you can use, the better. But yes, because your win condition is something is tied behind your spells doing 1 billion damage, and then you're also knocking things away, you're essentially reserving your weapons for utility purposes. So for instance, I'm looking for things like if he gets close to me, I'm looking for Reaper Qs to knock him away. And then if he starts, maybe he tries to merciless charge or get on top of me, I can pistol E out of the way, or I can slasher Q to dodge like that with an iframe. Those are 2 iframes. Or I could even set things up really quickly with a slasher and then hit him with this, knock him away. Then he takes that bonus damage from Wings of the Fallen. Even if it's a normal slasher, it doesn't really matter. And then Spear, obviously, if you're running something like Frostbat, you're freezing him and you can combo with that Spear Q, knock him away that way. So all in all, this right here, again, we're talking about, if you don't know what the concept of like skill floor, skill ceiling, I believe honestly that caster builds right now have the lowest skill floor in the game in terms of how much viability you can have based on how much skill you have. Like obviously the better you are, the better success you'll see. And if you're up against a really competent opponent, then they can definitely cream you if you're running something like this. But at the end of the day, hitting someone for 182 damage on a single move or spamming someone's counters with voids, right? At the end of the day, taking 250 damage from 2 voids that you can't block, that's a lot of damage. And then you're now taking more damage from different ignite ticks and things like that. So, okay. So that is why I would recommend, if you are wanting to get into the PvP side of V-Rising with less of a time investment, try a caster build out. But anyway, that is going to be it for now, guys. Hopefully you got something out of this. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I'd be happy to help them. Again, check out Chappell's page, his YouTube, his website. They've all been really, really, really cool. Lots of information there, and he has a lot of knowledge when it comes to different caster things, all things casters. So he's a great resource for that. But anyway, until next time, I hope you enjoyed this. That's going to be it, and we will catch you in the next one.